Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Archiware webinar where we are partnering up with RSTOR. Thanks, everybody, for joining nice and early. We've still got people appearing in the list, so that's great. So yeah, this is a webinar Wednesday, Media Archive to Software-Defined Cloud with Archiware and RSTOR, to read the title. I am David Fox from Archiware, also with JPY, the UK distribution partner. With me today, I've got Steve and Peter from RSTOR. So Steve Wharton is Sales Engineer, Peter Lavington, Sales Director. Hi, chaps.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. So yeah, let's see what we've got. So before we go into the content, we've got a questions panel in the GoToWebinar interface where you're welcome to type questions in. We've got about half an hour, 35 minutes of content that we're going to deliver to you, and then we'll take your questions. So the way that we'll take questions is you type them in at any point during the webinar, and we'll go through all of them at the end. And me and Peter and Steve will answer them. So things that you might want to think about are maybe you're already using cloud storage for media archive and have some questions relating to the existing system that you're using and how that might compare. We're interested to have your feedback generally on cloud vendors and how it might be going for you with cloud storage if you're already using that for media archive. And charging structures can be quite confusing, so sometimes we get some questions about that. So just some prompts for some ideas for things that you might want to think about and ask us about. We're recording the session, and we'll share a YouTube link to this session, including the Q&A. So if it's interesting to colleagues, maybe then you can share that with them. We'll email everybody that's registered and attending the webinar with the links to the slides and the YouTube video, etc. So no need to try and take notes. So in this webinar, the orange bit, we're going to talk about archiving and why that might make sense in the context of archiving media files and using cloud storage, specifically with reference to RSTOR. Then the Archiware products that facilitate that are P5 Backup and Archive, where P5 Backup is more disaster recovery and P5 Archive is talking about long-term archival of data. We'll look at where you can deploy Archiware P5, which is a piece of software that you purchase and then use with the storage of your choice. And we'll look in a bit more detail at the P5 Archive module, specifically how it has some media asset management functionality for accessing your media archive and finding things in that archive to recover. The RSTOR guys will talk about RSTOR Space, which is their cloud storage, which has got a different charging structure to many of their competitors. So there's no egress fees to worry about, and a very simple charging structure, and also a low cost per terabyte month. Excuse me. And we'll look at RSTOR Transporter, which is a piece of software from RSTOR that allows migration of data from either on-prem disk storage or any S3 compatible source into RSTOR. So if you've already got data maybe with one or two other cloud vendors, you can look at migrating that into a single point with RSTOR. So I'll begin with some slides around the Archiware P5 product and specifically around the archive workflow. So let's just have a little look at archiving media data to the cloud and why that's something that you might want to do. I think anybody that's in the media space will appreciate that a lot of data is created from audio and video capture. And once projects are delivered, you end up with a lot of work that's been delivered, but the files remain on storage. So an archiving workflow is really crucial for media workflows to reduce the production storage costs so that you're not having to add storage all the time. But if you're going to move data away from the edit storage, then where are you going to put it and how are you going to find stuff in the future? So that's where P5 Archive comes in. So over on the right hand side of this slide, you can see that tape is a common target format for media archive data, but increasingly we're seeing customers looking at cloud storage. LTO tape is a traditional archive media, but it requires on-prem cabinets to be installed into its mechanical kit, which needs to be on maintenance contracts. So there's a fairly heavy upfront infrastructure cost associated with deploying tape, although that's not to say tape isn't still entirely relevant. Cloud is very different. Cloud pretty much has no upfront and infrastructure costs. Everything is based on the amount that you're storing from one month to the next, and you don't need to worry about running out of space because cloud storage services are elastic, so they can just keep taking your data for as much data as you want to give them. So yeah, that's reasons behind why you want to do media archiving. There are two modules, as I said earlier, from Archiware within the P5 suite. There's a backup module on the left-hand side here. So backup can also run to cloud, including RSTOR Cloud, and backup is a disaster recovery tool. So this is distinct from archive, which is not there for disaster recovery. You should also have a backup running that's protecting all of your disk-based data from physical hardware failures, acts of God, ransomware, etc. And P5 Backup can do that, and it can store that data on disk, tape, or one of various different cloud vendors' services. But you don't keep backup data forever. There's normally a backup window beyond which you don't retain data. So the archive is where you're able to keep data forever. It's for the long term, and we have a mini media asset management interface to allow you to find things in that archive, which I'll show you in a second. We also have things like drag and drop integration. So people wanting to put stuff in the archive can just drag and drop into an Archiware supplied desktop application. There's a number of media asset management and digital asset management products that we integrate with. Like I said, we're fairly flexible on the storage side because we support disk, tape, and cloud from many different vendors. And generally speaking, if you're archiving completed project work, then your backups will be much smaller because you're not backing up all the work your organization ever did for the last 10 years all the time. So P5, as I said, is a software purchase. It's not a subscription, so you own P5 outright. We have an annual renewable support and maintenance that entitles you to support and updates. It runs on Windows, Mac, Linux, FreeBSD, Solaris. You can install us on QNAP Synology Netgear, so that means that we are in the store for the QNAP devices. You can just search for Archiware, and then you could immediately begin archiving storage from the QNAP storage into the RSTOR cloud if you wanted to. And you can also deploy P5 on any Linux or Windows instance in the cloud, and we have an AWS Marketplace deployable image to make that really quick. The mini MAM interface, which I'll give you show you in the live demo shortly, but just to give you a quick overview of what we have here, that what we're looking at is a database of archived media files, in this case CCTV open source files. So these have been archived to the RSTOR cloud storage. On the left hand side, I'm browsed into a particular folder within my index that existed on a file system. I have a list of media files. I have a grid of thumbnails captured from a single frame within those files, so at a glance I can see what those files have in them. And then by highlighting one of those files over on the right hand side, I can play back a proxy of that file to see what's actually inside. I can view some captured metadata, and this is customizable. You can capture whatever metadata you wish. So, and then from here, I could elect to recover some or a whole folder's worth of media files from RSTOR Cloud back to my on-prem storage. So that's broadly our interface. As you can see, this is a Chrome browser window. Everything is running in a web browser in terms of configuring and driving P5. So you can do that from any computer with a web browser. So basically any computer within the organization. So it's a kind of work group product. So that's my little intro to P5 Archiware Backup and Archive for those that weren't already familiar with it. I'm going to hand you over to Steve now to talk a little bit around RSTOR, beginning with the info about RSTOR Space. So over to you, Steve.
Cool. Cheers, David. So RSTOR Space is our globally hosted S3 compatible storage offering. Essentially, it consists of kind of two layers. So we've got a software-defined global mesh network that's designed and optimized for transmitting large objects globally, and basically it overcomes the impact of distance on latency. So essentially you can stream objects that are stored within RSTOR space around the globe, and your time to first byte of that data is still really, really quick. But essentially, we're hosted in co-locations around the world, and it's a relatively new offering that we have. So we've had products since 2019. The company was founded in 2016. And what we wanted to do was address the modern requirements that customers have for cloud storage. So cloud storage isn't new itself. I mean, Amazon created it back in 2006, but the sort of workflows that people have now, the way that people collaborate, the way that they want their data to be globally available and moved to where they need to perform their compute, that's the modern world, and it's very different to how these clouds were created back in the noughties, essentially. So what we've done is created a high performance tier of S3 storage that's globally available, but also we do it in such a way that it's got a very simple pricing model. So unlike the major cloud vendors, we're not going to charge you for replicating within region or API calls or egress. So it makes the whole thing very, very cost effective, but also very predictable. And predictability is one of the things that's often put people off using cloud storage in anger when it comes to a pricing perspective. So let's jump onto the next slide, please, David.
There we go.
So as part of our scalable offering, we actually lay out the data that we ingest in an optimized way. So we get very good performance for large and small objects, and we get pretty symmetrical read and write performance as well. So as a rule of thumb, we typically find ourselves being 10 times faster on average compared to other cloud storages, whilst based upon our predictable pricing model, typically around about 1/5 of the cost compared to AWS and Azure or a GCP. The way that we're deployed, we've got multiple points of presence. So we've got about half a dozen sites in the US. We've got a couple of sites in the UK today. Later on this year, we'll be announcing our EMEA deployments. And in APAC, we've got one location in Sydney, Singapore's in process now, and we've got 2 locations in Japan as well. So essentially, we're pretty good global presence, and the way we're locating in the colos is we've got very low latency on-ramp access into the cloud vendors as well. So if you wanted to actually run some sort of editing process out of a CSP, but actually have read and write access to RSTOR space, you could do that with low latency very easily. You can also choose to have multiple replicas of your buckets in different locations as well. And there's no charge for inter-region replication. If you're storing 2 copies of your data, you just pay twice the capacity that you're consuming. We also, based upon our mesh network, have the ability to do what we call data superpositioning. So we've got heuristics that if they notice a change in access patterns, so let's say you're normally accessing your data in the West Coast of the US, and all of a sudden an authorized user needs to access stuff in the East Coast of the US, will, in reaction to that change in access pattern, start to stream a read-write cache, essentially, to that new location temporarily, allow that user to interact with it, and then synchronize back those changes back to the original location.
Is that something that's included, Steve, within the standard terabyte month costs, the superpositioning?
It is. Depending on the workflows, some people find it, beneficial to store their data in multiple locations, and as well as having access pattern benefits. If you store 2 copies of your data, it actually increases the availability of your data and also has a knock-on impact on the durability of the data you're protecting as well. So there are benefits in having multiple copies in different locations as it is, but yeah, superpositioning can also be just part of that offering.
Yeah.
So as we've said before, there's no charges for API calls, looking at your data, checking your data still there. There's no inter-region replication charges, and the big deal, of course, is there's no egress. So recovering data from RSTOR space is just part of what you're paying for. So compared to other clouds, it gives you really predictable pricing. And you can choose to pay on a month-by-month basis, or if you want to, you can do multi-year contracts and pay up front. Some people prefer to do that because they've got an allocated budget, and unlike public cloud consumers, it means they can, have predictable pricing and not all of a sudden find themselves trapped, and when they've blown through their budget by 30–50% or whatever it is. As I said as well, we store the data with erasure coding. You can store your data in multiple locations, and the combination of multi-site replicas and erasure coding gives you up to 11 nines of data durability as well. So that's really important too.
Cool. So
the easy bit, no fees for data access, no fees for data movement inside your region, and you don't need a math PhD to forecast what your charges will be. It's all just really super simple.
So as a media, like a post-production company, as an example, if I've got a rough idea of the amount of content I create a month, and that's what I want to archive, then that's pretty much all I need to know to be able to cost out the cloud storage with RSTOR. And even if I end up having to recover a lot of data or recover all my data even, that's not going to impact upon an estimate of the cost for the cloud storage.
Exactly that. So, I mean, and the other good thing as well is that your data is always online as well. So from a pricing perspective, it kind of nets out as being similar pricing to AWS Glacier, but it's online, and you get better than S3 standard performance compared to what you get with Amazon as well. So it gives you really good price performance, the best bang for your buck you can get.
Excellent. Right, so next slide.
Yeah, thanks, David. So Peter Langton here with RSTOR, and just going to take you through here kind of the commercial models and the go-to-market models here. So if there are any resellers or MSPs on the call that are perhaps thinking about adding RSTOR to their product portfolio, that's very easy to do. You can do that essentially just buying through our distributor channel in the UK and essentially just reselling it. But it can also be fully white labeled. So you can fully white label RSTOR space, also offer S3 storage out to your customer base, essentially having storage under your own brand and your own portal branded for your organization. And then essentially that's backing that storage off onto RSTOR. So for any resellers or MSPs out there considering that, please give us a shout. And what does that give you? I mean, it would give you obviously recurring revenue streams, help you open new accounts and win deals, but essentially you'd have an offering comparative to what AWS are offering out into the market, and it would be disruptive from a price point and a performance point. And we're finding RSTOR particularly good from a performance point of view, especially within this M&E market, and moving and storing large amounts of content. Petabyte plus is really where the scale of RSTOR was built for. And if you're a customer out there, then contact your typical supplier, infrastructure providers. We typically get our product to market through the channel. Please contact us for any more information.
Cool. So the other offering we have is a SaaS offering. So you don't need to deploy any infrastructure. It's just a portal that you log into, and Transporter is a cloud integrated service that allows consumers of it to actually migrate or move petabyte scale of data between on-prem and cloud to cloud, and cloud to RSTOR, if that RSTOR space, if that's what you need to do. I mentioned earlier we've got our global mesh network, and we're actually using a lot of these techniques internally to stream data around the globe, around our network, and we kind of figured that this would be pretty useful for customers as well. And we had some interest from some CSP partners that we work with who actually asked us to help them with a migration from one cloud vendor to another, and that's kind of how Transporter was born. So essentially it really simplifies the process of doing large-scale migration, but essentially it uses infrastructure within our global points of presence to actually connect to a source, connect to a target, analyze that source bucket, and then break that job, that list of objects up into lots of parallel tasks and actually chunk up all those objects as well. And then we stream them through our network, get them into the destination and do some checks, and then basically send you out a simple report saying, hey, everything worked, or you need to look at these certain areas here. And in fact, I can just show you it now if you like. It's just really simple. If a customer's got large amounts of data to move, this is the easiest way of doing that.
Steve, I'll make you the presenter. Okay, I see you.
Cool. So here you are. I've just logged into the dashboard. You can see things like recent migrations that have been formed, things that are in the queue, transfers that have been performed. When it comes to creating a migration, it could be RSTOR space to one of the cloud services. It could be on-prem S3 compatible storage, or it could just be cloud to cloud, like I mentioned before. At the moment, we're just in an early release phase of actually supporting on-prem file systems as well. So this could be SMB, it could be NFS, and essentially that could migrate a large amount of, I don't know, pick a NAS vendor data and then migrate it to RSTOR space or to another cloud service that you want to move that data for.
So you could pump data from AWS to Azure with this. It doesn't have to be one of the endpoints. Doesn't have to be RSTOR.
Correct. Yeah. Although we'll use our global infrastructure, our transporter nodes to break those tasks up and transfer them, you don't actually have to store the data in RSTOR space unless you want to. You could also do a double copy, if you like. So move some data from Amazon to Azure, but on the way, store a copy in RSTOR space as well.
Okay. And how do you charge if you're not being the recipient of the data yourself? So you take a fee for the storage costs. Do you charge for the amount of data that you've transmitted for the customer?
Yes, it's a subscription. You can do a one-off migration, if you like, and it's really designed for customers who've got huge amounts, many petabytes of data they need to move around. And so we've got a tiered pricing structure based on the petabytes that you believe you're going to move during the course of a contract year.
Yeah. And if you're doing the on-prem, if you're accessing a customer's on-prem storage, do you just do that by deploying some software on the customer's premises, or is it a hardware deployment?
So there's two answers to that. So if you're looking at doing on-prem S3 compatible as the source, you don't need to deploy anything. You just need to make an S3 compatible endpoint externally available to our infrastructure, so we can go grab that. Okay. If you're going to move a file system, what we have is virtual appliances that you can deploy, one or many, depending on how you want to maximize the throughput, and those actually hook up into our infrastructure and connect to SMB or NFS mount points in the customer's on-prem environment.
Got it. Okay.
And from the point of view of just hooking up, literally, you're picking regions, and then you're pumping in keys and secret keys, that kind of stuff. If you want to, you can restrict the migration to a certain prefix, and it's the same. It's the same on the destination. Access keys, endpoints, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Once you're done, hit start migration, and we go away, do the analysis, and then start performing migration. When we're done, we can email reports, or you can actually look at reports inside the environment here, and just check out what went on.
Cool.
So it's super simple. You can set up incremental migrations. You can set up reoccurring migrations as well. Later on this year, we'll have the ability to do near real-time synchronization between public cloud, source and destination. So yeah, interesting project when you've got lots of data to move.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks for showing us that, Steve. So I'll grab the presentation back. There we go, back to my slide. Right, so we're going to move into the demo phase of our presentation now, starting with a little look at Archiware. So let me just get myself orientated here with the right tab. So I'm going to begin with my login, which is timed out into the RSTOR portal. So I've got an account here that I've been using to create a couple of buckets so that I can configure my P5 archive workflow to use them. So there's a bucket here called P5 V7 demo, because we're now on V7, version 7 of P5, and I've got some data stored here in this bucket. So once the bucket's created, which is just simply a case of going back to the buckets menu, adding a new bucket and giving it a globally unique name, then we don't really need to worry about what's being put in the bucket, because Archiware P5 manages all of that. So this is the Archiware P5 web interface, which you saw briefly earlier in that screen grab. And in order to be archiving to that RSTOR cloud, this is timed out now as well. Just log back in. So in order to use the RSTOR bucket, within my archive tab here, I've got storage manager configuration. I've got my cloud service up at the top here, and I've plumbed in the various credentials for my P5 V7 demo bucket. I'm choosing to utilize 2 parallel upload streams. So this means that my P5 server will have 2 independent network connections to the RSTOR service. And this is something that you can increase based on the amount of bandwidth that your P5 server is sitting on, basically. So this is actually running in AWS infrastructure, my P5 server. So we're going between Amazon Web Services for my Linux instance and RSTOR for the storage. I can click on the compatibility button here once I've added my RSTOR bucket, and P5 will do a bunch of tests, including uploading and downloading and setting metadata and deleting and using multi-part upload, which is something which increases the throughput, and the green ticks indicate that all of that stuff is compatible. So I'll be able to use this bucket. And then I simply set up a container, which is a new concept in version 7. So I've got my RSTOR archive container configured here, which is just a very simple piece of configuration. And then Archiware will figure out how to use that bucket to best store the data that I want to archive. So now within P5, I can create what we call an archive plan. And I'll just very quickly show you the tabs across the top of my archive configuration include things like automatic archive, where I could have my archive plan on an hourly or 12-hourly or weekly, daily basis on a scheduler, archive the contents of a hot folder that I configure on my storage. So that way you can just have users place completed work in a particular location, and the auto archive feature will make sure that gets archived to the cloud. Alternatively, you can manually browse storage, which is what we'll do to archive a couple of media files in a moment. The previews tab here lets me configure the open source products FFmpeg and ImageMagick, which you may already be familiar with, to generate proxies and thumbnails of the media assets that I'm archiving. And the metadata tab here allows me to write a simple shell script or batch file that will extract metadata from the files, the media files that we're archiving, and make that available, visible, searchable in Archiware's index, where everything goes once it's been archived. So if I wanted to access some of the storage on my machine, I can go to manually archive here. I can choose my data volume, and I've got a CCTV movies folder, which has just a bunch of sample movie files, which I've been using to archive in this demo. So I could simply choose some files and add those to my archive basket, which appears over the top here. And this allows me to go visit different folders and choose different things that I want to archive, either individual files or folders. And when I've collected everything that I want to archive up together, I hit the archive button. I choose my archive configuration. I've just got one set up, and I hit the start button. And then the monitor window within this web interface will allow me to see that job progressing. So you can see there's now a job there spinning away. I can look at the detail on that, which will show stuff being uploaded directly to RSTOR, 3 files in total. You can see we've uploaded 12% of about a third of a gigabyte so far. This is going at the prevailing speed of a fairly cheap AWS Linux instance, so it would go faster than this if you've got a real meatier piece of hardware in use. And so that job will run to completion, and then I could either choose to remove those media files from my live storage. Maybe I want to archive them to a couple of different places before I do that, but ultimately those files will go offline and they will just be available in the archive. So later on, if I'm looking to recover some of these files from the archive, I do that via the Restore tab at the top here. I go, you see both backup and archive are available on the left-hand side. So we're interested in browsing one of our archive databases. I just have one configured here. And then once I'm in the archive database, if I just switch off those panels, I basically see a browsable file system. So you can see the CCTV movies as it was on the live file system. And in there, you can see the contents of that folder from the perspective of we've archived this stuff and this is being kept in a database now. So you can see each of these files, it's displaying the archive date. So you can see if I sort by that column, some of those files are showing a date of just a moment ago because these are the ones that we've just archived. And if I double click on one of these, I can see the detail for that particular file in the archive. So you can see at the top there's a table showing the various different times that this file has been archived and where it's being stored. There is a playable proxy, although this particular piece of CCTV footage doesn't have much going on in it. We'll choose another one in a sec. And then there's the metadata that we've captured at the bottom. So this is all the information that we have about this particular file in our archive index. If I show a grid of what's in this this folder, I could then choose to play something back. So you'll see that proxy playing back with a bit more going on. So this is a classroom, you can see people moving around. So yeah, you can come in here, you can visually browse and see the contents of files. You can also search. So I could be searching in my entire index for specific file names, specific image dimensions, codecs, durations, and so on. So everything that we're capturing about what the files that we're archiving is searchable. And if I just click on one of these, there's also an information panel over on the right-hand side that we can look at a particular file. So this is Archiware's mini media asset management functionality, as we call it. Everything that you're archiving is available through this interface. And this is invaluable once you've got many thousands of files archived across many years. This database can handle all of that data and can remain fast and responsive as you're searching through it. And the entire process of recovering something is just as simple as hitting the Restore To button, choosing a folder that you want the file to come back to. P5 will tell you which cloud store this is requiring to have access to recover it. And if I hit Start, again, I can use the Job Monitor window to watch the progress of that restore as we're downloading some data from RSTOR and then putting that media file back on the storage. And we optimize the way that we communicate with the RSTOR storage so that we are uploading reasonably large chunks of data at a time. So even if you're archiving many tiny files, we'll be bundling that together, compressing it, and then sending that to RSTOR in the most efficient way possible. So that pretty much concludes my little run through to give you an idea of what it looks like within P5 to use cloud storage to do archiving. And with that, it's 35 minutes past the hour. So we will move into the questions phase of our presentation. So before I do that, though, I'll just beam up a couple of URLs. So you can get a 5 or a 30-day evaluation license of P5 if you want to have a play with it. Your local sales partner will also be happy to assist with the demo, maybe help you get stuff up and running. So p5.archiware.com/download is your link to grab installers and license keys. And then we have the RSTOR Contact Us page here if you want to get in touch with the RSTOR guys to discuss their offering in more detail. So we'll move on to the questions now. So I'm going to have a little look inside of the questions panel here to see what we've got. So I see some questions. So let's just read these out, guys, and see what we make. So question to kick us off from Herman. Herman says, we got an offer about RSTOR cloud storage, about €60 per month and terabyte TB. For our project, about 15 terabytes, 9 archive, 6 backup is too much. Are there plans that the costs differ if it is backup or archive? Thanks, regards, Herman. So I think from my perspective with Archiware, we're not in control of the cost of the cloud storage. We have both backup and archive, and you could target that to different buckets within the same cloud vendor or with different cloud vendors. So with P5, you can choose where your archive data goes, where your backup data goes. I think, Steve, that your pricing is per terabyte per month is fixed, and you don't have different tiers where it takes longer to get hold of your data, maybe for archive and so on, because all of the data stored in RSTOR is online, isn't it, Steve? It's all on disk. It's not going into cheaper storages like tape.
Yeah, that's correct. So from the point of view of commercials and pricing, I suggest that Herman have a chat over email with Peter and have a look at that pricing for you.
Yeah, was the question that the price was too high, or whether we weren't doing a small enough capacity?
So €60 per month for 15 terabytes, I think, might be what Herman is saying. Okay. So yeah, he is quoting a specific price, but I think the broad thing is that with RSTOR, the storage is a fixed cost. So whether you're using it for backup or for archive, you need to be okay with that cost, albeit that it's a low cost. And Herman should probably get in touch and have a discussion around.
The cost doesn't change for the use case; it's a fixed cost. But yeah, Herman, get in touch, or we'll reach out and we'll have a discussion on that. Yeah,
we've got your contact details, Herman, so we'll reach out. Right, question from Christopher. Do you charge for egress costs if my egress terabyte exceeds my monthly storage allowance? I'll let you can answer that one, Steve. Do you charge egress for even if the egress terabytes exceeds my monthly storage allowance? I guess that means that if you upload 100 terabytes in a month and you want to download it twice, that's fine, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. We don't charge for that.
Yeah. So there's not a monthly terabyte allowance as such. You pay for what you upload into the storage. So there's a monthly terabyte cost, and if you upload 100 of those, then you pay 100 times that cost. And if you can put as much as you want, there's not like an allowance. Follow-up question from Christopher: how much do you charge if I delete the content within 1 month of storage? Is there a minimum billing period for anything that's stored? I guess there is.
There is, yeah. It's 60 days by default.
60 days, okay, yeah. So if you delete stuff, you're still going to pay for that 60 days of storage.
Yeah, so for example, if Christopher uploaded a petabyte of data on day 1 and then day 2 deleted it all, he'd still be paying for that petabyte for that 60-day period.
Yeah, that's clear. A question from Malik: audio quality disturbed. Okay. Oh, and then coming back and saying that it's okay. Yeah, sometimes we get, depending on your customer's own internet connection, you might get us breaking up, but I haven't experienced any breakup from my side. Okay, P5 question regarding do you support SpectraLogic tape libraries? So yeah, the answer is yes. So if you do want to do archiving to tape rather than cloud, then we support tape hardware from all the vendors that currently manufacture tape libraries and drives. I think Quantum are the only people left making the actual drive mechanisms. HP have dropped out, but yes, Quantum libraries, HP, IBM, SpectraLogic, Tandberg, Overland, so on. We have customers using all of these products. We support all of them. And LTO9, I think, is on the horizon at the moment. So that means that the LTO8 storage costs will go down a bit and there'll be a larger capacity. I think 18 terabyte LTO9 tapes will be on sale quite soon. Question from Mike: can Transporter do incremental copies between clouds? I think you hinted at this during the presentation, Steve, right? You can do incremental where you analyze the difference between the source bucket and the destination, which is obviously quite a task, and then work out what's different and then just transmit the changes, yeah?
Yeah. So the answer is yes, we can do that. If we see some new objects in the source, we'll transfer those to the destination as part of that incremental copy.
Cool. Question, I can't pronounce the name, but how can I restrict access to RSTOR is the question. I guess normally when I'm setting up this kind of stuff, I would attempt to make sure that because P5 is the software responsible for writing the data into the bucket and all of the access to that data is going through P5, then it makes sense to kind of restrict as far as possible access to the bucket to just that P5 server wherever it might be running. I don't know if the person asking the question is referring to that, but Steve, what can you say about what restrictions are possible on a bucket within RSTOR?
Yeah, there's all sorts of different layers of protection you can put onto your RSTOR space storage. So the kind of simplest layer is you create users, you create access keys for those users, you define policies which control, read, write, list, create, delete, those sorts of policies. Then you assign a policy to a user, then that user and their keys then have those privileges on all buckets or specific buckets in the environment. And in fact, you can layer multiple access policies onto a set of user keys as well. Now, some of our larger customers, they end up in co-locations nearby or operated by the same operator that we're using, and so they can take advantage of things like cross connects and metro connects and those sorts of things. And we also have virtual circuit technology partners who can also restrict or take your network traffic off the internet and put it through private circuits between your source and RSTOR space as a destination. But if you are going to use just connectivity over the internet, and lots of people still do that, you can actually whitelist the public-facing IPs that are allowed to access your environment. So if you've got a single internet connection, or perhaps a group of VPNs, you could say, hey, just this public-facing IP, or just these public-facing IPs in this particular subnet range, and restrict all access to RSTOR space down to those.
Okay.
So there's lots of ways of doing that.
Yeah, it was the IP whitelist, blacklist thing that I was thinking of actually with regards to running a Linux server in the cloud. You know what the public IP of that is, so you just basically could blacklist everything except and whitelist a single address for that one.
Yep.
Okay, brilliant. So that's the end of the questions. Last chance to type anything in if anybody in the audience has got anything last minute that they want to bring up. Yeah, apart from that, that was great. Thanks, guys, for the information about RSTOR. Hope everybody found that interesting, learned something that they didn't already know about one or the other of the products. We will get in touch with everybody here with links and opportunities for you to come back with further questions. So with that, thanks, Steve.
Cheers, David.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Okay, see you in the next webinar. Bye, everybody.